Session of the Forest Grove City Council. The topic is on council compensation. A friendly reminder that no public comment will be taken and the council will take no formal action tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Assistant City Manager, Mr. Paul Downey.
Okay, we can get the presentation back up. I'm only going to hit a couple slides. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. And Dave Anderson's going to, he's got a few more, he's got a couple comments he wants to make after I'm done. So if he wants to come up to the middle so he's ready, we'll be ready for that. So
Paul, I'm not seeing you or the city council. Just an FYI.
can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Can you see the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, we'll get the camera turned on, I think.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Just want to know.
All right. Okay, we held a work session on June 24th. This is a follow-up. The purpose of the night's work session is to discuss further the recommendations and receive any direction from the council on what changes, if any, the council is willing to consider. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go over this slide. This is the current compensation you're getting. We covered it at the last work session. Next slide, please. The committee, the budget consensus members of the budget committee had 2 meetings, and their consensus about the current compensation, which emerged over those 2 meetings, was it's not enough transparency with the current compensation, as residents do not know how the compensation is structured. Current systems weighted too heavily on insurance, which focuses primarily on retired or self-employed persons. Total value of the compensation of each counselor is not necessarily proportional to the duties and responsibilities of the position, as there could be approximately a $24,000 difference in individual counselor compensation based on the chosen levels of health insurance. So they met and they made these recommendations. You saw these recommendations for last time, and so we're going to assume you've read them for this time. So we'll go to the next slide. And the next slide is the other compensation items which the committee is recommending remain unchanged regarding the devices and internet access. And the reason for the proposed changes, they realize this is a significant shift in how elected officials are compensated, but the proposed compensation structure would be more transparent to residents. The committee felt this compensation structure would be more equitable, as all councilors would be compensated at the same level, except for the council president, who would get slightly more under their recommendation. Would provide health insurance for the elected official with the option of paying for other qualified family members. This would address the main inequity in the compensation structure identified by the committee members. And next slide, the monthly stipend could encourage persons who might not otherwise be able to afford to be on council to run for the office, thereby potentially broadening the pool of candidates who might run. This was a key point for the committee members, as it could help increase the diversity of the candidate pool and help address the city's DEI goals. And also, the proposed compensation structure does not increase costs to the city. And so I'll turn it over to Dave if he has anything to add before we take questions.
Thanks. If you could just put up the last of my 3 foils, that would be helpful. I will be very brief because primarily I and others who are here, I'm sure, would like to understand better how the council feels about these recommendations. But I wanted to speak just briefly about our rationale, and some of it will be a restatement. But let's go ahead and go to the 3rd foil here, if we could. Okay. So these are the driving points for us. Transparency was the first thing we really felt was important, that any citizen could walk into the city offices and ask how much compensation is going to city council, and they'd get a clear, unambiguous answer that didn't depend on how much health care that someone was electing to take. Equity is another very important part for us, because we felt that the compensation levels should track the level of responsibility and the demands of the job. Clearly, the mayor has the highest demand. We know that the council president sometimes has to step in when the mayor's not there, but anybody who has to be on call for their work is generally given some extra consideration for their willingness to do that. Inclusion, this is another very important point for us. We feel that these revised compensation package will enable a broader spectrum of people who feel like they could apply and serve on the council than would otherwise be the case, which is a very important thing for us. And finally, stewardship. This proposal resulted in an overall reduction of what the taxpayers will be spending And we think that's obviously a good thing as long as we can still accomplish what we need to do. And we believe that these proposals do that. So I'll end my comments there. I'm happy to take any questions you might have about what the committee thought. We have other committee members here. Tom is with me, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the whole budget committee that worked on this and spent like 6 additional hours of your time figuring this out for us and giving these recommendations. Okay, I'm going to open it up to discussion. Any counselors wanting to start? Counselor Gustafson.
I had a clarifying question. I think since the last meeting, it's gotten a little bit foggy in my brain about the insurance compensation versus the dollar amount compensation. Does this new path still provide insurance? Should counselors want the insurance?
It provides it to the elected official with a subsidization of 95%, as is currently the case. But if the elected official wishes to cover other members of the household, they have to purchase that separately through the city.
And how is that different than what it is currently?
Currently, a counselor can apply the 95% subsidization to everybody in their household if they wish.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Ewing.
Thank you. So these are some of my concerns, and I would really like to have a deeper discussion on this as we go forward. First of all, I always have to do this, and that is to justify my knowledge. So I will tell you, I'm a nationally accredited master fundraiser. And in order to qualify for that academy, I had to serve as a volunteer manager and many other disciplines in order to get my certification. I believe there were 292 nationally when I got my accreditation. So I do have a real familiarity. 7 years as a volunteer manager with over 300 volunteers and intern programs. Having said that, I would like to discuss the Federal Volunteer Act of 1997. I want to make sure that we're looking into that clearly because the Federal Volunteer Act provides protection, legal protection for all of us who are considered volunteers. So we need to have a discussion about whether or not we as council members who are volunteers will still have the same protection under the law. Also, I would like to mention that under the Fair Labor Standards practice, this is going to increase the amount of time staff legally will be required to deal with this new compensation package. First of all, if we are paid volunteers, then we do not really have the right to, as proclaimed, go forward and file a case against discrimination, minimum wage, those types of things. We relinquish that. Also, I'd like to talk about the downsides. Paying one volunteer, which we are currently, over other volunteers will provide an equity issue as well as legal issues because it will require the staff to set up 2 separate systems, one whole system for the volunteer who is now being paid and one whole system for the volunteer who isn't, as well as one whole system for the employees. So now you have 3 reckonings that the staff will have to pay attention to going forward. That's one big issue. So there are a lot of these questions and a lot of information. What I would like to do, rather than take more time, I would like to submit a letter to the council as a whole and staff outlining my concerns and the legal issues that need to be considered before we make such a monumental change in our philosophy. And let's get it right. This is a philosophical discussion. It should have been brought up earlier in the year. It should have been brought up at the retreat. And it certainly should have been brought up before the last budget meeting of the session. So I hope you'll consider that I am going to put those things into writing and I am going to submit them to the city manager for distribution so I'm not violating public meeting law. And I don't find this to be transparent because this type of decision, this type of philosophical change needs to go before our voters. We may be surprised that they follow another path and decide, yeah, this is important for us to continue and have leadership and have more diversity. But it's their choice, not ours. So yes, I have a philosophical difference in how this has been approached, but I also have a philosophical difference in what constitutes a volunteer that we all knew we were when we ran for election and what constitutes the legality of a paid volunteer, because there's a lot of weeds there we're not talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Does staff want to respond to any of Counselor Ewing's concerns?
The stipend and the health insurance are already offered to the council, so we already have those systems set up. And what's being proposed is just a change in the levels of compensations for both the stipend and for the health insurance. So as far as staff taking any more staff's time, it would not take any more staff's time if the proposal as recommended went through.
I don't agree with you,
Okay,
Paul.
well, Counselor Ewing, we'll have a short work session. We need to make sure
I know,
everyone
I
gets
know.
a chance to speak. Thanks. Okay, so a couple things I want to bring up. Through my time doing this position as a counselor and as mayor, a lot of work's been done around DEI and volunteering and like trying to increase accessibility and community engagement, which are two of our values. And, ODOT, TriMet, what a lot of people are saying is a stipend. And, I want to bring this up too, because I think there was I was trying to rehash our discussion from the last meeting. And I think there was, I think the first level of conversation is a stipend isn't what you submit receipts for as a cost of doing the job. A stipend is supposed to help you be able to serve and do the job. And so in what people who have done equity work for trying to increase engagement in DEI have found that a stipend is the most equitable approach, because if people need childcare in order to make a meeting, they can use that money from their stipend to pay for their childcare. If they're driving their car a lot, if they need to take unpaid days, the stipend does those things. The stipend's not to pay for my plane ticket to go to DC and, lobby for federal funding. That's being reimbursed for the cost to the city. So I actually think that the group, I'm going to disagree. I think that I'm willing to bring this as a resolution and add a public hearing. I heard the thought that we need the public's input. So even though typically a resolution doesn't have a public hearing, I think one approach is to bring it to council in a public meeting, use our communication channels, invite the public to testify and give their thoughts on it. Because for me, I am willing to decrease. This is a decrease in salary. It's a decrease in only one type of incentive to run on council. I'm willing to decrease that in hopes of doing the DEI work and the community engagement work and making it easier for more people to run. We just went through the Charter Review Committee. That Charter Review Committee spent 1.5 years, and what they said was, we can't do term limits. We can't do districts because we don't have the level of engagement. And right now, I don't want to see our pool get shallow. The deeper and the more accessible you have, the wider you open it up to people, the better policy, the richer discussion. And so that's why I'm in support of this. I'm in support. This is a work session. This isn't a final discussion. This is hey, can we bring this to a public meeting, ask for a public hearing, and then we can all vote on it. And that would be my wish, is that I think we should do this. I think the committee spent 6 hours I think we have a diverse group. It was actually brought up at the first budget meeting. I don't know if you were in attendance, but that it was brought up. Like, we've been doing this process. So there's no sneaking around trying to hide. And we are actually, this is not an increase, this is a decrease in our compensation. Councillor Gustafson.
Counselor Ewing, I'm eager to read what you're going to write and send out, because I don't understand a lot of what you're saying. I know there's a lot of details there that I don't have knowledge of, so I do appreciate that, and I think that will be helpful for me to understand where you're coming from. So thank you. A couple things. I've had some time to think since the last meeting, and one is I hear the word salary, compensation, and stipend, and volunteer. And I've never understood why you're a paid volunteer. If you're paid, you're not a volunteer, you're getting paid. So I'm assuming, Councillor Ewing, that some of what you might be writing might explain some of those terms. Okay, so that will be helpful, but there was conversation about transparency on what elected officials are spending their compensation on. If it's my compensation, that I don't think that's public, right? So that's none of anybody's business. I'm doing the work, I'm getting the pay, just like anybody else. So that was just another thought. But then I really sat with myself and I remembered hearing of other organizations voting for their own raises and realized how much of a hypocrite I was, because I was going to vote to move forward with this. So I'm asking everybody else to sit and think about whatever we do, whatever we decide, how we want to move forward, that we do bring it to the people for a vote. I really think that even though we're small and we do things a little bit differently here, I think it is ethically important to have our compensation go through a vote through the people. That's it.
Councillor Martinez.
I agree with Councillor Gustafson. I also feel that to be even more transparent, it needs to be brought to the community and voted on through them, and not made, and that we not make a decision on that ourselves. Because I'm in agreement. I don't like to see where other community electors vote in their own raises.
Council President Rippey.
Thank you. I agree with the point about taking it to the voters. This is significant enough of a change that in every aspect that I've ever heard, the people have always been upset that elected officials vote for their own pay raises without going to the people who are actually paying those compensations, whether it's a stipend or a salary. I also think that even though, and I really do appreciate the work that the subcommittee did. They looked at it and they studied it and they made a recommendation. It's all well and good, but they admitted themselves that they did not look at an expense-based, reimbursement-based type of compensation. And I'm not so sure that isn't viable or transparent or equitable. So without knowing what that kind of a system could provide us, I think we're looking at just half the cookie. And I would rather have more information with respect to that kind of a system as well. Thank you.
I think I'm struggling because I'm just going to be very blunt. I'm frustrated because we already get compensated. We never went to the people. This council before us never went and said, hey, is this okay? We have all benefited from this one type of compensation. So now we have an opportunity to say, is this compensation that we currently have, is it equitable? Does it help everybody access this position? And we're going to sit here and hide behind smoke and mirrors and say, oh, we should take it to the people. Well, we're going to take it to the people and say, hey, we want to decrease our compensation. Because that's what this proposal says. It's like, hey, the council is going to decrease it in hopes of creating a more inclusive, accessible way to serve your community. Like, I don't feel like if this was a huge increase in pay, I could get behind this, like, let's take it to the voters. But for this, I think a public hearing, having people testify, reaching out to your channels and like engaging with the community, getting a pulse, and then the members deciding if how they want to vote or whatever, then like right now, we're not even getting to the public policy process. We're not even getting to a point where we're going to say, hey, community members, we're thinking about doing this. Please come testify. We're not even letting, because you can all still vote if this comes to a resolution, comes to a council meeting, you would vote on the resolution. But you're like not even allowing the public policy part of it. And I think that's what I'm really frustrated about is like, as we have a responsibility in this position. And I think that this, I don't want to even assume why we're not allowing it to carry out through the public policy process. Councillor Gustafson.
I don't understand the smoke and mirrors comment just because I just said that I was being a hypocrite. All right. I said it on public television when I was thinking about moving this forward. That is the complete opposite of smoke and mirrors. I want the public to be able to decide what I make by being up here making these decisions. And just because we already have a compensation that we didn't have go to the voters does not mean that was correct and ethical. So I think moving forward, we need to think about that and move forward ethically.
Council President Rippey.
Thank you. I take exception to the smoke and mirrors comment. You're basically implying that we don't care, that we're not interested in the facts, that we're not interested in other options. I take great offense at that, Mayor, and I don't find that as an acceptable behavior. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Valenzuela.
I would like to say
Here.
Councillor
something.
Valenzuela is next.
Yeah.
Councillor Ewing.
I know.
Thank
I
you.
just want to make sure that we
Councillor
hear from
Valenzuela speaking.
Michael
Please don't
and
interrupt. Point of order.
Mariana.
Point of order.
Yes, I think, Mayor, you were not understood when you said the words smoky mirror. Is the way I understood it is that you're talking about this process that everyone, most, of the councilors here want to make this path transparent. But it's how we are seeing things. It's not, she did not mean to say what everyone here understood by that. So I just want to make that clear because I completely understood what you said. And it had nothing to do with that, but it's just, our minds and the process that we're trying to go through or not go through. In terms of the compensation, I do understand where many of you are coming from, that it should be taken to the people and all that. I do understand that, but you also need to understand the equity, and since I came here to this council, I have seen an issue with our DEI. We put it on paper, it looks beautiful and everything, but we need to walk the talk, and if we want to recruit people to serve in this council, sometimes they might have challenges that none of us have. And, to make their path this an opportunity that is actually, possible for them to be part of this council. I think we need to think about that, those implications for the future, who's going to be sitting here in the future.
Councillor Ewing.
if we're going to, really be honest about this, and you want DEI and you want equity, then we need to take it out of the volunteer terminology and be able to pay a living wage for those who are serving. I think that we pretend that we believe in that, but the reality is this, that working folk, I have been poor, and working folk, for the stipend that we're talking about, the wage that we're talking about, that is their monthly wage. So to not take it before the voters, to me, will not only cause deeper transparency issues, but it's going to cause an outroar. I would like to hear from Michael, please.
He doesn't have his hand raised. So I think moving forward is, do we want a resolution? I mean, so where are we at as a council moving forward? What are our options from city staff? It's too late at this point to put it on the ballot for November, correct? What are some of our options? Please.
If you want it, I believe the filing deadline to put something on the November ballot is August 16th. So the council would have to take some kind of formal action to refer something to the ballot prior to that date. The other option, as you mentioned, was a resolution and holding a public hearing commensurate with that resolution. So those are principally the two options, I think.
A question with taking it to the ballot. Would the first question for the voters to vote on is if counselors should get compensated? I mean, because right, that's an assumption, but I'm just trying to walk this back. We don't really even know if the voters think we should get the health insurance and the $300 or $150 a month. So do we ask, is the first question, do we ask, should the Forest Grove City Council receive any sort of compensation? Councilor Gustafson.
I think that we are looking at this in a different angle now, and so we need to have a couple more work sessions, figure it out.
I would like to see it as a resolution at the next meeting, and it's start there and let the community come and then have a vote. And if that doesn't work, if we can't come, or whatever happens is decided, then we can take next steps. But I really think that if you look at the other municipalities, a lot of different things, the reason most of them do a stipend, we're we have this health insurance, but that's really only an incentive for people who need health insurance. I don't know. I just think that I would love to have an opportunity, and I'm not, to hear from the public on this during the summer to tell us if we're on point or not on point. I do value that. Councilor Gustafson.
So this is a work session, so we can't make motions.
Right.
Okay. I'm not changing my stance. I think that this should go to the voters.
And when is, although general session, we can't, or general election, we can't put this forth to the voters. When is the next?
May is the next
You
election.
have 2025. If you put it on earlier, you might have to pay the county for that. Pay the county to do a ballot measure if it was on the March election. The May election, they typically don't charge.
Correct.
So there's one counselor that's in favor of putting a resolution on for the August meeting, and there's one that's not.
Who's in favor of the resolution at the next meeting?
Me.
Okay.
I'm not interested in doing it other than putting it before the voters.
So are you throwing out a third option of putting a resolution to put it on the ballot?
I'm simply saying that the insurance wasn't put before the voters, and therefore I will not back going forward without that being the end result. So I'm not really interested. I'm interested in hearing what the people have to say. I'm not willing to change my stance.
I have to say too, I'm not retired or in business for myself. I like the insurance because it's better than what I get at my job. And I'm in agreement with going through and doing more work sessions and gathering more information.
I agree with the resolution to move this forward.
So 2 for the resolution, 2 for not.
I am not in favor of a resolution right now. I think we need more time and more input to decide what's a reasonable approach to take on this.
Councilor Marshall?
I'm in agreement with Councilor Rippey.
Okay. I'm going to adjourn this work session at 7:12. Not attending this work session. Maria, do you know? Oh, he's on. Okay, there he is.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to call to order this work session of the Forest Grove City Council. The topic is on our urban renewal plan. Just a friendly reminder that work sessions, there will be no public comment taken, and the board will take no formal action. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to city staff.
Thank you. I always forget your title when we're at the URA, but thank you, Mayor. Brian Pohl, Community Development Director, here with Miles Glowacki, Economic Development Coordinator. Before you on the Urban Renewal Plan, and sort of a kind of refresher and next steps of where we're going with the Urban Renewal Plan. Tonight we're going to briefly recap why Urban Renewal exists and how it works, and then briefly recap the existing Urban Renewal Agency programs. Familiarize the board with additional specifics in the Urban Renewal Plan about the property acquisition program, and discuss potential issuance of debt to fund the program. And just to kind of help you just conceptualize tax increment financing, which is what urban renewal is, it's really a debt management tool to get improvements done and have the funds to pay for them easily over successive years. To give you a sense, the URA was established in 2014 with a maximum indebtedness of $15 million. About $2 million of that was taken out for the Jesse Quinn building, leaving about $13 million maximum indebtedness remaining. It expires in 2034 by the plan date. However, state law has changed, and it's not so much by the plan date now as it is when you hit your maximum indebtedness is when urban renewal ends. There are 525 tax lots in our urban renewal area, and you can see the area right there in the blue. About 200 acres overall. And right now, the tax increment revenues are approximately $750,000 per year. Why we do urban renewal? The URA seeks to increase taxable value of property in the urban renewal area, further eliminate blight and blighting influences, improve the utilization of land within the URA, to catalyze private investment and job creation by offering financial incentives that meet community objectives, reduces risk, and encourage private investment. Upon expiration of the agency, return more revenue to the taxing districts than without the investment. Next slide, please. In order to have an urban renewal agency in the state of Oregon, you have to also have a plan that outlines a framework for how the debt is to be issued, what projects the URA wants to take on, and how to spend that tax increment revenue. We have been implementing programs in the plan, and you have been actively participating in that. Tonight, we will recap those programs that are already in place and then seek to clarify their implementation. Next slide, please. As a reminder, these are the current URA programs. We have the storefront facade improvement program that's funded at $20,000 a year, one-to-one match, $10,000 maximum. The building improvements program, which you just recently approved, that's a one-to-one match, funded at $350,000 per year, $5,000 for design assistance that doesn't require a match, and then $100,000 maximum per project that does require a one-to-one match. And then you've also talked about doing the land banking and decided that we would fund that at $350,000 per year. Match what is apply in the case. Next slide. And so the plan outlines the following amounts for the programs we're kind of talking about today, especially. There are framework. You can always change your amounts. The board has the discretion to actually amend the plan, change amounts, change programs, change all those sorts of things. There are major and minor amendments that we won't really kind of get into much today, but just know that you have the authority to amend that plan. In the plan, the building improvements program is a $2 million program. That's sort of, one of those things that the plan envisioned taking on debt to fund that program. So you can either have $2 million up front and just sort of divvy it up or not. And then the property acquisitions is at $3 million. And I want to just kind of remind you, these are 2014 dollars. And if any of you bought a house recently between 2014 and 2024, those prices have changed quite a bit. And so that number is a bit antiquated, put it that way. Next slide. You all approved the building improvements program on June 24th of 2024. Good news, we are live on the city's website, where you can now go apply, and you can also translate this thing into multiple languages. We're taking applications for design grants up to $5,000 with no match, and then, as I mentioned before, the building improvement grants up to $100,000 with a 1-to-1 match. Moving to property acquisitions, we've had this conversation before, right? We've talked about it. I think you all had a very strong direction that you emphasize the importance of property acquisition and land banking and redevelopment. The priorities so far have included the downtown redevelopment of the Jesse Quinn, and more recently the downtown grocery store and boutique hotel. The URA plan recognizes the long-term benefits of property acquisition financed through the issuance of debt. I want to remind you that these acquisitions per the plan must be from willing sellers. We are not going to use eminent domain or anything like that. This is very much, we have to have willing sellers, properties that are on the market, or we can negotiate with a property owner who's willing to sell us their property. They also must be within their renewal area, so inside that blue area on the map that you saw earlier. The plan identifies 13 properties for potential acquisition. We will show you those properties that are in the plan in the next slides, and as well as a potential process moving forward. If the board would like to discuss purchasing property, we need to hold an executive session. We can't talk about specific properties in text. So please kind of just, if you have questions about specific property, please kind of just hold them and just talk offline or wait till the next executive session. We need to not talk about specifics, but just sort of these are the general, what's in the plan, and these are the properties that you would see in the plan. Can't talk specifically. Next slide. Here's a map of the properties in the plan. We did leave 2 of these off. These were 2 properties that have recently sold and been developed with new development. That was the Hagen site and the Albertson site, I believe. But those have obviously had brand new developments that are not going. So it's not really worth the discussion of talking about those 2 properties. But there are several properties on here, 11 remaining that were on that list, that are in various states of for sale or interest in selling. I will just kind of point out that you see several properties on here that are kind of outlined in red. Those are properties that the city already owns. Now I want to clarify that sort of distinction between city-owned property and URA-owned property. If the city owns a property, the URA would have to buy it from the city. Luckily, you know if you're willing to sell it. Next slide. This is one right out here, the gravel lot that many people park in and everything. That is 0.36 acres. Zone town center transition, currently used as parking. The Main and 21st parking lot, zone institutional, uses surface parking right now. I think you all quite recognize this lot pretty easily. This lot on Main and 19th, also institutional, zone institutional, uses surface parking, 0.21 acres, owned by the city. This parking lot as well on 1917 19th Avenue, surface parking, 0.11 acres. Times Litho site was in there. We include this because Site B is part of that as well. Town center transition, and as well as vacant right now. Obviously, you have some activity right now that you've already kind of authorized. This is the Woodfold site across the street from here. The zone town center transition, 2.04 acres. Currently used as warehouse and underutilized land. This is the site of the gas station, zone town center support. Also has been sort of redeveloped lately. You know, I don't know as far as what level of investments in that building or not. It's currently being used as a food bank. Obviously, I think you know that. Next slide. This Kane Petroleum site, zone community commercial. We won't discuss any specifics tonight, but that is on the list. Tapio site is on the list. The Wells Fargo parking lot. And the Schlegel property that's west of us here. So the question right now is whether the URA would like to consider issuing debt to fund these programs. The remaining maximum indebtedness is about 13 million. One of the things you have to consider as you move forward, though, is the amount of increment that's coming in right now, and the ability to service that debt as you move forward. Plan calls for or allows 3 rounds of debt issuance. We've had the first one, that was with the Jesse Quinn site. The second was to come with, I forget exactly when it is, but we're kind of in that window right now. And just to remind you, the issuance of debt to do these programs is why the program exists. That's really the tool that you have at your fingertips. It's a powerful tool, and just to kind of give you an idea of why it's like that. These downtown properties tend to just be harder to make projects pencil. Modern building codes, reuse of properties, running into things like underground storage tanks or vaults and things like that. It's just inherently a harder place to develop, and so the URA can step in sometimes to kind of help fill that sort of gap in financing, to make projects pencil and to help revitalize your city. So the discussion points tonight are, whether or not the URA board, you all, want to consider utilizing debt to finance building improvement and property acquisition or property acquisition, and if so, how that might be structured. Do you have a consensus to allow staff to move forward and investigate opportunity sites identified in the plan, and provide a report to the board on current potential of these sites? And pending this analysis, we can recommend potential amount, timing, and type of debt issuance. And next slide.
Okay, so let's go through, well, let's go to questions first, and then we'll go bullet point by bullet point. Okay, so Councilor Martinez.
So one question I have is the gravel lot over here. We've already said it's for campers. So do we have to assign a new area then if we use that for something? I would think
That seems
so.
like you would have to. Well, I don't.
Also with interchange in the time, place, manner, or that's what.
Not in our ordinance. The Supreme Court had a ruling on it, but in terms of what our resolution or the ordinance, sorry, it's not a resolution, what our ordinance said with time, place, and manner, like at this point, there hasn't been a change. Like that was passed and voted. So if we wanted to continue, that would be something we would discuss. So yes, the short answer is yes. Without
Good.
getting into the
Short
weeds.
answer.
Okay, I was like, without getting into the. Okay, further questions of staff?
On the property, where is it? The former service station. Is there anything with DEQ that has to be?
We can't
trying
specifically
to-
talk
we're
about
trying-
I don't know if there
property.
was any DEQ, like if there's.
We can't discuss about anything in specifics with the property.
We're trying to avoid individual property discussion, just kind of keep this on the high level for,
Sorry.
might you want to do stuff for debt? If you
Question
want to
noted,
discuss
we can come
individual
back with
properties, there's going to be quite a bit of analysis will be need on some of them, and we would come back to you in executive session to discuss property,
This is
any
a-
potential property acquisitions.
And this is an opportunity where we can ask staff to look into other properties that aren't necessarily listed.
Mhm.
So we could ask staff to look at the U.S. Bank building as an option,
We could say, staff, could you look at other properties?
other properties.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Happy to.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, the
Councilor Gustafson.
Is there a concern with your first bullet here regarding financing? Interest rates are really great right now. So, and I don't, I can't foresee the future, or, maybe there's some clues that tell us that it's going to drop in a year or whatever, but is that something we need to consider before moving forward?
It absolutely will be. I mean, you're 100% right. I think we're all thinking that too. I mean, it's something that I think everybody kind of knows is happening right now. I think when Paul comes back and does that sort of analysis to see what kind of debt we can service, it will include a certain assumed interest rate.
What we'll do with the council, I mean, if the board's open to issuing debt for property or building programs or other phases of the URA program, what we would do is we would say, okay, here's our estimated cash flow up to 2034. I mean, we get so much now, and we anticipate property tax increases of this, so of this time up to 2034, and expense increases of this. So here's potential debt service money we might have. Then we'll go out to our financial advisor and say, based on current interest rate conditions, market, if we're going to issue debt out to be repaid by this point in time, how much debt can we issue now, given the interest rates and all the other situations? That would be a piece of the analysis we'd come back to the board with.
Thanks.
Council President Rippey.
Thank you. So as Brian already pointed out, debt financing is the tool that URAs use. And so I think we should, in fact, consider moving forward with more debt financing. We have the opportunity. We have the limits are there. And what staff is proposing here is to be more proactive about and re-energizing our community along economic development, which is what we've been looking forward all along. And so I see no reason why they should move forward on each and every one of these bullets here. Then, I mean, all we're doing is pointing them in the direction or giving them permission to go in the direction that they're already wanting to go, and then they'll bring the details to us. So I'd recommend that we go ahead and have a consensus on all of those.
Okay, great. Councilor Gustafson, let's just go down the line.
Yep.
Yep, for all three?
Yep.
Okay, Councilor Martinez?
Yes. Yes.
Councilor Marshall?
Yeah.
Councilor Valenzuela? Councilor Ewing?
Yes.
Okay, so it looks like there's consensus.
You guys rock. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to adjourn this work session. Thanks.